Am I speaking on one or both at the moment?
Speak on item 6, because that's the item we'll be on. No way.
I think the procedure was to introduce it and then have the speakers in the constitutional
No,
rules.
we've never done it like that. We've usually had the speakers and then the officers presented the report here, so.
Certainly, Chair for Cabinet, Cabinet members would present the report and then we would have public speaking, but it's entirely a matter for you. OSP is slightly different and it would certainly be a longer presentation by officers before members speak, so it may be better if most of the public rather. So it might be better for most of the public speak first for the purposes of getting things moving.
Okay.
Right, well, I'm speaking without the advantage of hearing what the officers have said, which means yet again the public cannot comment or correct or disagree with what officers have said. But I can definitely disagree with what's in the report in terms of the fact we're going to do nothing about air quality in the borough because we're not yet at the legal limits. The research, particularly into PM10s and PM2.5s, makes it clear that people in this borough are dying early. There's a massive uncertainty as to the exact number, and on the top of page 13, the paragraph there makes it clear that the estimate of 65 or 64 could actually be 6 times the real value, it might only be 10 people dying early, or could be half the real value. But there is clearly a massive number of people who are already in poor health. And, this isn't killing healthy people, it's foreshortening their lives of healthy people, but it's actually killing those who are already in a poor way early. And it clearly is also the case that people are losing around 600 years of their lives, cumulative around the borough, because of the effect of air quality. Air quality that is well below the actual legal limit, but is actually at a point where we should be doing something about it. Because every little bit of improvement we make will actually make the least healthy people in Nuneaton and Bedworth live a little longer or be able to do a little bit more activity. And it clearly is a possibility that we actually put in policies to at least not worsen air quality when we're talking about development projects, etc. We should be trying to fund cleaner bus services. We should be trying to sort out the bit by Midland Road, the bit by Eton School, and actually doing something to improve our air quality. There is no doubt that actually people are dying earlier because of air quality. There are large-scale studies that point to 20,000 people maybe in Britain dying early. And you cannot disagree with it. Lots of scientists have done this work. What the scientists cannot say is how many of those live on Midland Road or how many of those live by Eton School. What you can say is that some of the people in the borough are really adversely affected, and actually doing something to help them is actually something that helps everyone else as well. Thank you, Chair.
Remember that in clarification. Councillor comment? Councillor Hay.
Councillor Concord losing 600 years of their lives. I've never known anybody lived over 600 years.
The way they work that out is that we've got 126,000 people who on average will live 80 odd years. Doing their demographics, they have worked out cumulatively everyone's lost a couple of minutes of life. Obviously, some people have actually lost several years of life, and some people have lost none. So, over the whole population of 126,000, they work out every year 600 years worth of life is lost.
Are we to wait for the item before we comment further? Because I could get into a dialogue, but I just don't see the point of it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll just give a sort of very brief background on air quality and then focus what I think is the most topical debate, which is the very final articles of PM2.5. So as the panel knows, air quality nationally is governed through the government's National Air Quality Strategy. And this council, under that strategy, is required to monitor and report on air quality and to declare air quality management areas if appropriate. and there are currently 2 air quality management areas in the borough. These have been declared because of levels of nitrogen dioxide. The rest of the borough is okay for all air pollutants under the targets set out in the National Air Quality Strategy. And within the 2 air quality management areas, we're okay for small particles, according to the targets in the National Air Quality Strategy and EU guidelines. The government gets its scientific guidance from a panel of multidisciplinary scientific experts called COMAP. And COMAP and the government and ourselves are aware of growing concern about the very fine particles known as PM2.5. And it's now well established that these are the most hazardous of the fine particles. Public Health England recently decided that they wanted to raise the profile of the issue of PM2.5 to bring it to the attention of decision makers, such as yourselves. And in order to do that, they published a report, which they did following guidelines from COMAP as to what was an appropriate methodology. Within the public health profession, they like to compare different causes of ill health and mortality. But you need to have a common measure if you're comparing things. And so they tend to use numbers of premature deaths and numbers of years of life lost. Now that's very easy if you're looking at something like death from road traffic accidents, because you can say, yes, that person did die of a road traffic accident at that age, and therefore they died and they lost this many years of life. It's much harder when you look at something like air quality, which affects different people in different ways, and it's very difficult to know what contribution air quality made to a premature death when a person already had a pre-existing condition such as respiratory or heart condition. So actually those measures don't really work for air quality, but nevertheless Public Health England wanted to find a way to express the effects of PM2.5 in those terms. So they developed a methodology in consultation with COMAP, and they've now produced a report to that effect. The figures they've provided, and they actually say this themselves in their own report, don't mean that many people are dying in the borough due to PM2.5, nor does it mean that a person is going to lose that many years of life in the borough because of PM2.5. The sole purpose of those figures is a statistic that gives an indication of the relative importance of PM2.5 compared to other health conditions. So it is wrong to quote the figure for the number of years life lost or the number of fatalities from the report and say what's happening in the borough. And the public health report itself says that that is an over-interpretation and a wrong way to use that information. On the question of, to press back up on that, within the report they say that currently there is no opinion as to what represents a safe level. If there's no opinion as to what represents a safe level, nobody can know whether the level in the borough is safe or not. It may be that the level in the borough is safe and nobody is dying or having their lives shortened because of PM2.5. On the other hand, it may be that it turns out that the levels in the borough are unsafe and people are dying early rather than having their lives shortened. At the moment we don't know. So you cannot say for definite people in the borough are dying because of PM2.5. It's a possibility and that's it. But as long as it's a possibility, obviously we have to take it seriously, and I wouldn't question the need to take this seriously. There is difference of opinion among scientists, including some of the scientists on COMAP. So the scientists on COMAP don't agree about this. I think they all agree that it's worth more research in order to try and resolve the differences of opinion that exist. But that is quite normal in scientific circles. Science moves forward by scientists disagreeing with each other and then developing further research to test, to try and find what the truth is and get to the bottom of it. And gradually you move towards a scientific consensus. At the moment the scientific consensus is we need to do research, but there is no consensus as to what is a safe level for PM2.5. The government has a commitment to review this within the next 2 years. So clearly that's going to move forward. You can draw your own conclusion as to whether that indicates the government are taking this seriously enough or not. but what they recognise is that there's a need for further research. But until we've got that further research, nobody will know actually what the truth is about it. There is currently a standard that has been set of 25 micrograms per cubic metre. That's based on our scientific knowledge, and that standard may be made more stringent in the future, but currently that is the standard. So, in looking at the borough, that's the standard we need to compare again. If you look on page 13 of the report, there's a table. A few years ago, we did actually monitor some larger small particles known as PM10. And the results we got were, you can see the top row, from 2004 to 2018, the levels varied between 17 and 23 micrograms per cubic metre. PM10 includes PM2.5 and a whole lot of other particles besides. And generally speaking, the view is that PM2.5 probably makes up about 80% of the PM10. So the second row shows you roughly the level of PM2.5 over that period, which is between 15.2 and 18.4. Current standard is 25. So that monitoring that we did locally indicates that we're well within the current standard. If you turn over the page, there's another table which brings you more up to date, because we stopped our monitoring in 2008 because we concluded we were monitoring something where there wasn't a problem, and that was expensive, so we stopped. But the government has a monitoring scheme that applies across the country, where there's a network of sites, very high quality monitoring, and they feed that monitoring into a computer that models the picture across the whole country. And the nearest site is in Coventry, so it's quite close to us. And based on that modelling, they estimate that in 2012, local levels were 10 micrograms per cubic metre, and in 2014, 12. Currently, it's thought that the level for 2015 is 11, but they have to do some further validation of that figure. So once again, this is well within the current standard of 25 micrograms per cubic metre. So based on that, there is really, I think we can derive some assurance that the levels of PM2.5 in the borough are well below the current target of 25 micrograms per cubic metre. Of course, that target might be reduced in the future, but for the time being, that's the target that's been set by the government in their strategy. All of that was presented to all members recently in a briefing note. So what we wanted to do was to bring you up to date with what's happened since then. Public Health England are continuing to try and raise the profile of this issue, and they've held a number of conferences, if you like, or workshops in different parts of the country to try and engage with local authorities, and they are trying to develop a method through which they can further raise the profile of this issue. So your officers attended the recent workshop with them and helped them to consider what methods they might use to raise the profile further. And they're going to develop some sort of a pack, which will be a sort of a profile raising information pack. That's as far as they've got now, that they've decided that's what they're going to do, and of course we have offered to help them in any way that we can. Regionally, the Directors of Public Health have asked for a regional brief for the West Midlands as a whole, of all the council officers and public health officers who are involved in this, to sit round the table together and try and review this and plan regionally, so that we're sharing expertise and we cover any cross-boundary issues. That group has met once, and of course your officers were present and will continue to be present. It's not clear at this stage whether that is actually going to contribute anything, or it may find that we're already doing everything we need to do anyway. I think the important point is that as long as the public health profession is taking the initiatives on this front, your officers will be there and will support it as much as we can. To bring you absolutely bang up to date, there is one thing that has happened since this report was written, and that is the government has made a statement to say that they are going to encourage Leeds, Birmingham, Nottingham, Derby and Southampton, which is where the PM2.5 levels are at their worst, going to encourage them to set up clean air zones where they will monitor the emissions from older buses and HGVs, which is thought to be the main part of the problem in those cities, but they will not be asking them to monitor emissions from private cars. So that brings you bang up to date with the current position, and Alison and I will do our best to answer any questions you might have.
Any member?
Well, you well aware of my involvement in all of this and the very various questions I've asked, which have been completely unsatisfactory, I have to say. I mean, this problem with diesel particulates has crept upon us really over a fairly small time scale. I mean, I've worked with Alison there since I was in County Council in 2009, and I sat on the committee at that time. And in fact, at that time, I warned that we were looking at the changes to diesel engines from petrol engines, partly to expect the air quality within our air quality management zone here to improve. It certainly didn't, as I expected. I mean, I've never driven a diesel car, and I wouldn't. Diesel fuel is extremely dirty stuff. It contains the petrol itself. The only problem with petrol in the old days was knocking. I think everybody knows that. That's why we put lead in it. It's a simple paraffin. It's the octane, the 8th in the series. Very clean material. Of course, you can't stick it in a diesel engine, unfortunately, because you get knocking even under the pressures that I used. I worked in the car industry for 35 plus years. Much of that in development with the engine plants themselves, including when Ford changed to the global, Ford Dagenham changed to the Ford Global Engine Centre for Ford. And some of the statements I've seen from some of those industries are not okay. The problems that have come up upon us recently with the deaths which have occurred, and this came to a head last year, and I pointed it out, when the Mayor of Paris is banning diesel cars. No, this isn't buses and commercial vehicles, this is ordinary turbo-charged diesel engines in small cars. It creates, I actually believe that there is a problem with all of these numbers because of the collection of the parts, so-called particulates. They're not particulates. As you did see the report I sent round, where this had been on TV just a few weeks ago. On the panorama programme, I think it was. It's on Monday the 23rd of November last year. When this guy, Frank Kelly, who chairs COMIAM, and the second one, they were talking about 30 billion particles per hour being ingested deeply into the lung, and this creates chemical problems. It enters into the heart areas, it creates cardiac problems, it creates problems with the lungs. It's extremely carcinogenic. I don't see any mention of cancer on these reports. Cancer is one of the big scare problems. Cancers are increasing dramatically in the country. I've spoken to the NHS on that. The one problem, I believe, in the measurement is how do you collect these particles? They're extremely, extremely small particles. The gases, they're not particulates. They can combine on a carbon atom like S or a few carbon atoms, but they're extremely small. They won't collect on a glass fibre filter paper. They'll go straight through it. So how do you know that these results are okay? All I know is I've been looking at the research over years here. And the danger of this problem, what we've just said, I think, suggests we're burying our head in the sand. We need to pay attention to this. If the Mayor of Paris is driving all diesel cars out of Paris by 2020, Boris is following him in London. Okay, he won't be around then, but within about 10 years, he's not using quite such a time scale. But if this is a serious problem, which I don't think is understood, Look at all the research, go deeply into it. The deaths are there, 29,000 deaths are attributed to this. If you look at the US, in the US, really, it took the US to point out that the Volkswagen Group were cheating with their measurements through the use of the computers to actually cheat on what results are coming out. These engines, when they are in stationary traffic, something's happened just in this very last 2 days. I got a note just yesterday from the college on the Hinckley Road, which is one of our worst areas in the whole of the town. The traffic is completely stationary a lot of the time during the rush hours. They're going to start charging, they're running into problems with funding, as we are. They're going to start charging from February the 1st for the kids to park their cars in the college. They're going to put barriers up. In the morning, when it's busy, the cars are whizzing in there. If you've got a barrier doing this, you're going to have traffic all the way through the town. There's nothing to stop them doing it. It's nothing to do with planning and development. I've been talking to the county over the last 2 days. They don't want to know because they're not planning. We've got a number of things happening here that we do have to pay attention to. This is extremely serious. And we should just look at what we can do. It's easy to say, okay, we don't have to do anything because the central government aren't going to do anything for 2 years. Look at the research in the US. Concerned scientists of America, look them up, look at what they've got to say. It took the US to find some of these problems. A lot of the research is done in the US. It's very, very, very dangerous. I think we ought to take a more positive approach into moving to lower levels, what we need to do. I personally, as you know, believe we need a bypass in this town very, very, very seriously. And somebody needs to start pushing the county council and government to find the funding to do that. It's as serious as that. So to hear what I've just heard, I'm not at all happy about that. Sorry, as I have worked with Alison around that, I have great respect for the comments around it, but I think you have to look at it more closely. Thank you, Chair.
First of all, on the question of diesel particulates, certainly it came as a great surprise to many members of the public who thought that by buying diesel they bought a cleaner vehicle. And I can assure you, your officers have always known that diesels have been portrayed as cleaner because of the carbon dioxide emissions. But we've always known that they're dirtier as far as nitrogen dioxide and particulates are concerned. We've always known that. So that came as no great surprise to us. I think it came as a surprise to us that Volkswagen had been cheating on the figures. And that sort of activity partly explains why air quality has not been improving as quickly as forecasts have suggested it would, because those forecasts are based to a large extent on vehicles becoming cleaner, and it turns out they haven't become cleaner to the extent that we've been told they were, in the case of Volkswagen. But certainly the diesel issue came as no surprise to your officers. And all the measurements and all the thinking that we've done has been based on that true knowledge of how dirty diesels are. The Mayor of Paris, of course, is dealing with one of the most congested cities anywhere in Europe or anywhere in the world, and will be taking action appropriate to the levels of congestion they have. And you'll see in the appendix to the report the parts of the country that currently exceed the objective for small, very fine particles are essentially congested cities. And if you look at, or towns, and if you look at the 5 cities that the government is currently asking to declare emission zones, and they are all major cities. We're not a major city. And in fact, even in Coventry, which is the largest city near to us, they don't feature on the list in the appendix. They are also below the target level. So we mustn't think that we need to respond in the same way that major cities respond. With regard to the statistic about 30 billion particles per day or per hour, whatever it is.
Per hour, 30,000 million particles.
I don't know where you have to stand to inhale that many. It may be that you have to stand in the middle of the road outside the Arc de Triomphe in the rush hour. I don't know way how to stand to inhale that many. Neither do I know how many particles per hour the human body is capable of coping with before it results in ill health. Because we are capable of coping with a certain amount before it results in ill health. What we don't know, nobody knows, what that amount is. So a figure like that is useful in a way of drawing people's attention to the issue, but we shouldn't use it to form objective decisions. With regard to how you measure PM 2.5, it's very difficult because it is very difficult. Councillor Foster's absolutely right. It's more sort of invisible fume. It's almost a gas. It's so fine. But nevertheless, it is a particle, and it can be captured and measured. But the equipment to do that is very expensive to buy and expensive to maintain. And so to say, well, we should measure it would have a significant financial implication. And the question is, do we have enough evidence of concern to justify spending that amount of money, which would then, of course, have to mean that we spend less money on some other valuable service that the council provides. And with regard to Alison and I looking into the research, certainly Alison does, it's part of her job, but it's not her job to scrutinise the international research, develop the level of expertise to be able to understand and interpret that and weigh up all of the different opinions. We have COMAP, who are the leading scientists in their fields, combined into a group that does that for us. Alison could spend the rest of her life researching that, and she would never have the level of expertise that exists at COMAP. So we take the advice from COMAP. We let COMAP do that review and that research. And all of the advice I'm giving you, I mean, I think Councillor Foster and I, both scientists, are a good example of the principle that scientists don't all agree. I haven't actually expressed my personal view on this. I've passed on the view of COMAP because my personal view is that they are the experts, so I have to advise you based on what they say. But it's an example of there is a difference of opinion, and there is. And I fully respect Councillor Foster's concern about this because it is potentially a very important issue. But it's only potentially at this stage. We're not anywhere near yet a situation where we can say there's a problem in the borough, or there's probably a problem in the borough. All I can do is present to you the COMAP expert opinion and the facts about the monitoring of
Can I just point out that there's one thing I missed from my input, and that's this very great evidence. We're talking about people dying in the elderly, and they are especially susceptible. But there's also a lot of evidence on the effects on children, especially young ones, and the problems with asthma these days, and certain types of allergy, which can come from these very, very complex chemicals. And that's also in the research.
Two other speakers saying that
Can we identify maybe locally what who the main culprits are for PMs in this, in Nuneaton in the borough?
Locally, it's vehicles.
It is vehicles.
Locally, vehicles are the main source of PM 2.5, the main source of PM 10, and the main source of nitrogen dioxide. And you tend to find that as nitrogen dioxide goes up, then PM 10, PM 2.5 will go up. And as one comes down, the others come down. And that is associated with the amount of traffic and in particular the amount of congestion. We have declared two air quality management areas based on nitrogen dioxide, and we have been monitoring levels of nitrogen dioxide in those two areas closely, and the levels have been coming down. So therefore we might anticipate that the table I gave you when we were monitoring PM10, that those levels will probably also come down relative to what they were when we stopped monitoring.
There's nothing there in the pipeline, planning-wise, that would actually, say, bring in an art manufacturer that might well increase, there's nothing long-term.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got sterling metals and, all the old foundries and whatnot.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. And if we were to receive an application from an industrial use that wanted to develop a large plant on some of our land, obviously that would be subject to very, very close scrutiny, and there's specific legislation that is enforced by the Environment Agency that will limit the amount of emissions that can come from that process. and they would be limited very, very stringently. Having said that, in the immediate environment around that plan, there probably would be some increase in the levels. But we haven't got that, and there's nothing in the pipeline at the moment remotely resembling that. It does raise a question, though, in terms of what would you do, because traffic is the main issue. And what can we do to reduce traffic? We're facing that problem now with the two air quality management areas. They're a problem because of the congestion. The congestion is there because of the road infrastructure, which is historic, and it would cost a fortune to restructure the whole of that infrastructure in that area. So there is a real challenge about what can you do once you establish there is a problem. And as things stand for nitrogen dioxide, all the indications are that as vehicles do become cleaner, that will solve itself in those areas. But could we, even if we invested in monitoring and then decided we wanted to do something to try and reduce the levels, what could we do to reduce the amount of vehicle flows and congestion? And I don't know what the answer to that is. The council doesn't have an answer to that. The government doesn't have an answer to that. In fact, the government is regularly threatened with prosecution by Europe for failing to meet targets in cities like London and Birmingham. So nobody really has an answer to that. And we as a borough would have to say, well, do we have an answer to it? But if we don't, we perhaps need to say, well, that may be a reason why we don't push the boat out and be like hyper cautious and preventative in this. Follow the government guidelines. There's nothing to suggest that we have a problem that we ought to then be taking on these major issues to try and address them.
You balance that then against filling the car parks, for charges and so on, bringing people into the town for markets and so on. There's an imbalance somewhere, isn't there? If you're on the one hand you're trying to avoid the pollution coming in, and the other hand you're trying to increase it by bringing people into the car parks.
Well, obviously the answer is to try and encourage people to use public transport or get
Yeah.
either under their own steam, on foot or by bicycle. But all of these things are very, very difficult to balance. It's hard to get people out of their cars, and myself included.
Electric.
Yeah.
I will come at it from a medical point of view. On the one hand, you've actually said you can't identify the number of deaths due to the particle emissions. However, has there been any communication with the hospitals, with the health department, to identify the people who do have cardiovascular pulmonary problems, to identify whether there is an impact, and then has there been any research to identify the cost of the care for those conditions, the treatment for the conditions, the cost of hospital admissions, the cost of medication, and the cost of ongoing care, because that has to be ultimately counterbalanced against the cost of how you're going to identify the particles. You've mentioned about £43,000 in terms of the equipment, the costing of it, but you've got to counterbalance that with medical care.
I welcome the fact that the public health profession has become more engaged in this, because the questions you're asking are questions really that the Director of Public Health needs to address. I don't know to what extent those calculations have been made nationally. Do you know if that's been done on a national level?
I think that was part of this last report that they did when they looked at number of hospital admissions attributable to respiratory illness, and put that in with his figures they've come up with.
So I'd look to the Director of Public Health to ask those questions and present that argument in these new forums that have been set up.
Certainly they were saying that funding from one stream could be put into a different stream. So if there was any thoughts, the money could be there. And monitoring, we're talking £40,000 of monitoring, monitoring doesn't actually get us any cleaner, does it? All it just tells us where we are.
So we would be faced with the old dilemma, the savings would be made in the
Yes.
NHS, but the costs incurred by this council. The NHS probably wouldn't turn to the council and say, well, actually, this is so important to us, we'll fund it. They'd probably expect the council to fund it. So it does come back to the question that the council funded this against other council services, as opposed to the NHS funding it against other NHS services. And that's wrong, but that's the way it works.
But you still need to look at the impact in your local area, because this area, due to its mining past, we know that there is a huge impact on pulmonary conditions, and therefore add all the transport issues on top of that, you're going to have major problems.
And I don't know how feasible it would be locally for the Director of Public Health working with the hospitals to analyse it, to say, well, of all of that respiratory ill health that's been managed, and all the cardiac ill health and all the cancers and all that has been managed, what proportion is caused by permanent levels of PM2.5? I don't know if they could get to that level of detail. I suspect that would be several years of very in-depth research.
It needs to be done eventually. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Any other
Oh, Chair, God blimey, I've come here as a substitute today, and this is about the most miserable meeting I've been to in a long while. But that being said, and it's all very interesting, I must admit it's not something that I massively take a great interest in. You know, I mean, as a councillor you have different things that you get involved in and whatever. And of course I read when reports are sent, I read it, but I've got to be honest as well, a lot of it goes over my head. And the problem I've got coming here today is I'm hearing what the officers said. I do actually have respect for Jim. Jim spoke to me in the past about his past life, if you like, in you know, the industries he's worked in. I'm sure his knowledge is valuable and whatever, but the way I've got to look at this is this report's come before us. It's been explained that the government are looking into this. Don't anybody run away with a thing that I've got great faith in governments. I'm not being political, I'm just saying governments looking at things. What are they fighting? Against industry. Well, we've seen what Volkswagen have done, and I do not believe that they're the only ones. I just don't believe it is the case. So we're into that dilemma, and I hear the questions that have been asked, very valid questions, but surely this thing's got to be looked at nationally by the expert. You know, we as a borough, are we going to solve Great Britain's problems of air pollution? I don't think so. And it's a classic one of the buses, isn't it? We all say everybody should use public transport. But what happens first? Do we tell people you can't use your cars while there's no buses or very little buses there? Or do we put the effort into getting the buses there and then people will by choice go? And that's the dilemma we have, and it's a dilemma we have with finance, isn't it? Where do we spend the money and whatever, and where do we jump first? And who's going to give in, if you like? Yeah, if we do work that the National Health Service possibly should be doing, they're not going to give us the money. They've got plenty things to spend the money on. So it's a real dilemma. From my point of view, I've got to think that, yeah, the government, and trust, my goodness me, I've got to trust that the government are looking at this. The so-called experts are looking at this. And if I'm honest as well, Jim, shout at your friends down at Westminster. I'm not saying you shout at us, don't get me wrong, don't put me up and on, but get on to them, because obviously they're the ones that can do more than we can. I'm quite happy for any resolution that we want to put forward to go to the county council, because most of the things we spoke about now are not even under us, are they? Bypasses. I'm not going to build a bypass. And buses and whatever, and getting them, and cars. I mean, what's the percentage of cars that are diesel now? So it's gone up a lot. And I don't know, it just seems that everybody thinks a diesel car is better. You know, but they actually do think, like you said, and it's not. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in a real dilemma, but I've got to trust the fact that that the government are looking at this and we need push and push and push, and programmes like Panorama, yeah, because lots of things in the past have been exposed, if you like, and yeah, we've got to get on with it. But sitting here today, I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to do. But can I go home now? I'm depressed.
Councillor Benmont.
Well, yeah, I can try and cheer Bob up, but it's difficult in the face of a lot of these figures, particularly when you talk about something you can't see, smell, taste, you know. And I had a particularly difficult winter last year, and there was a lot of Sahara sand and stuff like that about it. And at the same time, the flu jab was much less effective than it had been in previous years, and hopefully less effective last year than it is this. But I'm looking into the report, and I have taken an interest in, I must say, in particulates and stuff like that. I've got a monitoring unit in my house, just a tiny thing that you can buy and run off your smartphone, and you can see what the air quality is, particularly when you're cooking. The house suddenly becomes very poor, and then half an hour later it's fine and it's down at good levels. And the humidity also, outside and inside my house, I've taken an interest in that, because the first thing I had to do was introduce humidifiers in the house to actually put some moisture back in the air, because it was very dry last year. I've now found that my neighbour runs a dehumidifier and the floorboards must join somewhere, and I've got a feeling that my neighbour is drawing the moisture out of the atmosphere in my house and creating a dry house for me. But I'm monitoring it. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the thing. It's down to about 60% at the moment, which is less than a good, healthy, humidified house. But I do take some assurance from this report. We have the canary in the cage that the miner used to carry about with him to see whether the atmosphere in the mine was safe or not. And we've got cities which are far higher than the concentrations that have been mentioned for Nuneaton, even in the difficult areas. We've got Coventry, who is apparently monitoring from time to time the air quality over there at the particular 2.5 level. And it does seem that we're halfway up the scale between very good and not so good. You know, the unsafe levels, given the present scientific opinion. So I don't think we are unnecessarily exposing the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth to poor air. I think there are a lot of external factors in your health which are not even contained in this report. So, as far as I'm concerned, if Paris is in trouble and Paris has massive congestion and they're doing something about it, they can demonstrate to us that it's effective and it works. And if it starts to work in the results which they can measure, then there's something useful going on there. And other towns and cities that are at far greater risk than the residents of this borough are taking action over time, then I think we can, just as a Clean Air Act did. Blimey, the smogs and the fogs that we used to have in this country, the air was absolutely foul, and the times in this country when leading petrol created mental problems for our children as they were growing up. So I think this is careful, it's scientific, it's monitored from a national perspective, and towns which have a severe problem are dealing with it. And there's no reason for this town to think about banning diesels or taking other action. I realise it's pressure for a better road system, and as has been said, that's historical and we have to live with that. And the effect is not desperate. I think it's quite safe, really, given the light of current knowledge. So I'm quite happy to thank the officers for a very good, very well thought out report, professionally presented, and I'm quite content to put this issue to one side and get on with the rest of my life. Thank you. So you agree with the recommendation? I move, Chair, that we agree with the recommendations contained in the report.
Councillor Foster just got in time, so keep it brief because we've had.
I don't like the views I've just heard because I assume you're not a scientist, John.
I'm not asking for please.
I've got my canary in the
We've just had a
cage.
personal
I've
comment.
got other towns taking action. If they find it works, we might be able to follow them, but there will be a national perspective about whether they work or not.
This isn't the issue. I'd just like to give Bob some information here. The problem that occurs today is because of the rapid growth of turbo diesel engines. I worked extremely in Germany from the late 70s through to 2000 into the 2000s and 90s. But especially in that 10 years when a lot of things was happening, and it had already happened from the Japanese side, the Japanese pressures on the Euro Tokyo, and they decimated, of course, the US market. Just to mention, for your help, Bob, here, the US market at the moment, the number of cars on the road right now is roughly about 1% of their total cars are diesel engines. We were fairly low back in the 80s. The one country that specialised in diesels is the one that's in trouble now, the one that cheated, Volkswagen. And it's Volkswagen who have pushed the world into that business. It's a problem in the States. It was Volkswagen who were found out on the cheating. And we do have to pay attention to this. It does matter. It's the diesel cars that are coming through our town into our air quality management area where we haven't seen improvements, in fact. Have we seen improvements? Alison, have we seen improvements?
We no longer have any exceedances in one of our air quality management areas, and we've seen a steady decline in the other one. We're not yet out of below the limit value, but we have seen an overall trend down since we've been monitoring over 15 years.
Nitrogen dioxide.
Nitrogen dioxide.
We're not talking about nitrogen dioxide, we're talking about particulates, which, as I've said before, are very, very difficult to measure.
Thank you very much for your report and your time. I suggest you can put into ordinance.
Of course, if I may add, if there's any major development in less than 12 months, obviously I
You
shall
will
let
obviously
you know
come back
and
before
I'll
that,
bring back
I'm
to you
sure.
as well.
I am going to move on to item 12.